All right, altitude drops. Altitude drops is, I want to say, the father of depth jumps, or like depth jumps on steroids, depending on how you want to look at it. Basically, it's the first part of the depth jump. In a depth jump, if you remember, you're standing on a box, you're stepping off, you're landing, and then you try to jump as high as possible. The altitude drop is that minus the jump. So you're simply absorbing force. It's really focusing on as much force as you can absorb, even if it exceeds the capacity you can store. So for example, if I'm using a depth jump with, let's say 10, 20 centimeters higher than my vert, I might be able to actually jump higher than my regular vertical jump because of the potentiation in stretch reflex. But if I'm using a proper height for an altitude drop, which would be 30, 40, 60 centimeters higher than your maximum vert, then upon landing, you would jump much lower than your maximal vert if you tried to jump, because the amount of force you have to absorb would slow down the transition from absorption to projection, and you would lose a lot of force. Now, the goal of the altitude drop is strictly to train absorption capacities. So the box, again, would be between 30 and, let's say, 40-ish centimeters higher than your maximum vert. Don't go crazy and jump off of a building. It will not provide better results, especially not if you were a heavier athlete. I mean, I've seen guys who are like 300 try to jump off 2 meters. I mean, yeah, they might survive it, but from a risk to reward ratio, that's not super smart, and it might actually cause more inhibition than potentiation. So really what you want is 30, 40, maybe 50 centimeters if you're a highly trained power athlete and you just land on a box. Now, this is still a lower box for me, but I'm just illustrating that it needs to be higher than your maximum depth jump. So you simply stand here. Remember the rules, okay? I need to keep this tight and this elastic. And not relax in the form that it's elastic, right? You're doing jumping rope, for example, or rope skipping. This is tight. The floor is hard, so that's 2 hard surfaces, floor and pelvic floor, that creates all that energy to be stored in your legs. So just step off and land, okay? Now, at what height do you land? To me, it needs to be sport specific. So if you're someone who jumps and sprint in your sport, and the angle of around 90 to 100 degrees is probably ideal, because that's likely the angle you're going to be using when you're jumping or sprinting. So that would be the angle you're shooting for. Now, as far as sets and reps, I recommend the same as with the depth jumps, 3 to 5 sets of 3 to 5 reps. This is an overload method, okay? It is to strength training what max effort method would be, okay? Now, if we compare, let's say, depth jumps and this one, depth jumps would be doing sets of 5 with 85% of the bar, and this one, the altitude drop, would be testing your 1 RM, doing a max effort work. So you cannot do the same frequency, you cannot do it as often. It's not something I would do necessarily for 4 weeks, okay? I would use it once a week, maybe for 2 or 3 weeks to potentiate the depth jumps, okay? But it's definitely not something I would try to use for longer than that. It's something you just pepper on your training. You pepper on your training, just a little dose here, a little dose there, because the adaptations are really rapid, okay?